In this live stream, we're going to talk about grand staff reading. If you want to play piano, you want to get really fluent at reading the grand staff, but it's something that a lot of students struggle with, usually because of the way it's traditionally been taught. So on this live stream, we're going to talk about the most effective way to learn as quickly as possible how to become fluent at identifying notes on the grand staff, reading music on the grand staff, and especially if you've been kind of glued to letters and mnemonics like every good boy does fine and face and good boys do fine always. I think this will be really eye-opening for you. And to make it more fun and interesting along the way, we're basically going to be playing a game together. It's called Kahoot. A lot of the kids watching this have probably played this at least once at some point, and this is our first live stream of doing a Kahoot match this year, so it should be a lot of fun even if you're watching this on the replay. And we're not going to do a big lecture and then put the game at the end. We're actually I'm going to do a little bit of teaching, and then we'll jump to the game, and then we'll come back. I'll teach a little bit more, and we'll get into that sort of groove. And so let's go ahead and dive right in and talk about reading music on the grand staff. So we're going to start with sort of how it's sort of traditionally been taught for many decades, if not centuries. Most people watching this have probably had at least one music class at some point where a teacher said, okay, we're going to do the grand staff. We're going to learn this fun mnemonic. Every good boy does fine. And then the spaces spell face. And then the lines in the bass clef, good boys do fine always. And then the spaces, all cows eat grass, which, you know, mnemonics can be good for some things, but imagine being in a class and somebody says, all right, every good boy does fine, face, good boys do fine always, and all cows eat grass. All right, got it? So even as we go through those sayings, you can see how confusing this is to have 4 different sayings for 2 different staffs that look identical. And even if you do go by these mnemonics, they don't actually tell you what octave of the piano any of these letters are. So in this live stream, I'm going to show you a much, much more effective way that's going to really supercharge your progress with getting comfortable with this grand staff reading concept and then actually playing music sort of in the most natural way possible. Just like when you read a book, you're not going to look at every single individual letter or even every individual word, but you're going to look how everything kind of strings together. And so as we go, do feel free to drop in the comments or in the chat if you have any questions. We'll take little pauses to answer any questions that come up. But we're going to start with sort of a basic concept. It's the landmark note system, and then we're going to build from that. And my hope is by the end of our short time together, you'll have so much more confidence in how this whole grand staff reading thing works. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to get rid of all these mnemonics. So we're going to erase all that. And instead, we're just going to focus really intensely on memorizing 5 notes really, really well. And there's a little trick that's going to help you with each of those. The first one is probably the first note you learned in piano. That's your middle C. So that one's actually probably already memorized. Most people, that's the first note that they learn. And then from there, we have little tricks that'll help our brain remember what those notes are. So the next landmark we'll talk about is this one. A lot of times we refer to this landmark as treble G. And the way you can remember that is the other name for the treble clef is the G clef. And so if you can remember that, then you just think, okay, the line that goes through that squiggly, that's your G line. So G clef, G. And then these 2 notes I'll show you as we go. Middle C, of course, is right here, right in the middle of the piano, and then your treble G is going to be right there. So it's that G going upwards. Next, we're going to go in the other direction to the bass clef. The next landmark we'll look at is bass F. And once again, we have a cool little trick here because the other name for the bass clef is, you probably guessed it, the F clef. So the line that goes between these 2 dots, that's going to be your F line. And that's going to be the F below middle C. All right, so we've got 3 landmark notes so far. And then we're going to do 2 more. And then I'm just going to drop a hint. This is going to be our first little quiz that we do. So go ahead and try to memorize these as we go if you haven't learned them already. And so the next 2 notes, there's not really a clef that helps us remember it, but there is a pattern here. So notice that these 2 notes, there's not like a clef pointing to exactly what it is, but they are symmetrical. I'll often tell students that this note is 1, 2, 3 spaces up. And then in the bass clef, this is 1, 2, 3 spaces down. And those 2 notes are both going to be C's. So the one up in the treble clef will be treble C up here, and then the one down the bass clef will be bass C down here. And so our 5 landmarks are, again, middle C, treble G, bass F, and then we have those 2 C's, 3 spaces up, 3 spaces down. And again, you have these wonderful clefs and patterns to help you remember that. And so these 5 notes, you want to get these so ingrained in your brain, you can just look at it and boom, you can find that treble G. Look at the F, boom, there it is. So much to the point you don't even really think about the letters. When you think about it, letters in music are almost more of a way we can talk about the music. And as you'll see shortly, when we play music, especially when we play piano, the music just moves too fast to think about letters. You know, like D, D sharp, E, C, E, C, E, C, F, A, C, E. You see what I mean? So we read music more by shapes and contours, as you'll see in a moment. But your first guidepost is going to be memorizing these so well, you can play them really quick, you can write them, you can look at a totally new piece of music and kind of see these 5 landmarks, because we're going to use those as guideposts. Now, at this point in our live stream, we're going to take our first detour to do our little game show. And let's see if this is all working right. Ah, perfect. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the sound to make it slightly more interesting. And so if you've never done a Kahoot game before, you're going to go to a website on another device. You could do it on your computer. It just might be a little tricky with different windows and stuff like that. But you're going to go to kahoot.it, and then you're going to enter this game pin, 5310162. And you have an advantage having shown up at the beginning of the live stream because you can get the maximum points. Anybody who joins sort of midway is going to be at a bit of a disadvantage here. So go ahead and enter that in, join the game, and we're going to start with a little mini quiz on landmark notes. All right, good. It worked for one person, so we know it works. All right, we've got Papo and Clara. Gosh, it may just be a match of 2. I see 9 people are watching. Don't be shy, everybody. All right, we've got Adrian. Thanks for joining us, Adrian. We got Annie. Wonderful. I see we have 8 viewers. Multiple people can play at home, especially if you're watching with your family, giving you the highest chances of winning. Nova, thanks for joining. All right, we're up to 5. We got 6. Michelle, thanks for joining us today. All right, we'll give it like, I think we lost a couple people. Maybe they lost their internet connection. We'll give it like 30 more seconds in case there are any latecomers, and then we'll get rolling with our first few questions of this Kahoot match. Oh, we got Papo back. Awesome. And we got Michelle back. I wonder if maybe you guys live in the same area and the Wi-Fi just went out for 2 seconds. All right, and we'll begin in 5, 4, another, gosh. Every time a new person comes, I feel like maybe I should give it another few more seconds. Oh, Olivia, thank you so much for joining us. And again, especially once we get to playing the game, banter in the chat is not only welcome, but encouraged. Oh, I see. Oh, did you guys leave the game so you can come back and pick your avatar? Maybe I finally caught on to it. All right, we have 8 players, and that just about matches the number of people watching the live stream, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. We're going to start with a few sort of practice questions that aren't worth any points, just to make sure that you understand how the whole thing works. And then because we are on a live stream, just a heads up, there is a little delay here. So once we get started on your device, you're gonna see the questions come up before you actually hear me read them on YouTube Live. So just be super keyed into whatever device you're playing the game on, because the faster you get the answers correct, the more points you get. So it's not only getting the answers correct, but getting the answers correct and very quickly. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and get started. Grand Staff Battle Royale. And so again, this is a practice question. So this is a quiz question. Who is this character from the South Shore Piano School YouTube channel? Is it Mrs. Sheep, Mrs. Lamb, Mrs. Livestock, or Jonathan Roberts? I always wanted to be a game show host. I think this will be the closest I get. And again, these aren't worth any points. These are just practice hits. All right. Cool, so we had kind of a divide between Mrs. Sheep, Mrs. Lamb, and Jonathan Roberts. Do check out those videos. Mrs. Lamb was really big during the COVID days. Those are still on our channel. And the leaderboards will not change because, again, the points were 0. So next we're going to get some practice with a true or false question. The left pedal on the piano activates the self-destruct mechanism and should never be used. True or false? And again, this is worth no points, so go ahead and just hit something. But once we get going, the time will matter. All right, I think we were mostly on the same page with that one, and one person I think was trying to be a little funny. We always appreciate humor here. Again, no changes, and then the next, we have one more practice question. This is gonna be a type of question where you have to put things in the right order on your device. So this is a puzzle question. Put these letters in the correct order. These are just alphabet letters, so don't overthink it. So you're gonna sort of click and drag to put them in the correct order, and then you hit answer. That's why we're doing these practice ones. This is the one that gets people confused sometimes. And if you notice, it is timed. So on your device and on the left side of the screen, you'll see how much time is remaining before it ends. Or if everybody answers, then that ends the question, and we see where everybody lines up on our leaderboard. All right, hopefully everybody understood how that works. Okay, so now the questions are going to start counting, okay? So this is gonna be based on what we just talked about with those 5 landmark notes. Remember, middle C, bass C, treble G, and bass F. Here we go. The next 4 questions will be on that topic. And as I said, the questions start counting now. Here we go. So we have a quiz question to start. What note is this? It's one of the ones we just talked about. Hopefully you were paying attention there. Middle C, bass C, or treble G. So I'll give you a hint. 3 spaces up, 3 spaces down. Remember, there's a pattern there. And the clefs give you a little bit of a hint. Treble clef, bass clef. All right, wonderful. The correct answer was treble C. So again, that's the C that's 1 C above your middle C. Let's see how that affected our standings here. All right, I have Clara in the lead, followed by Adrian, Livia, Pampa, and George. All right, next question. And again, we have lots of questions and even some bonus points ahead. So next question, another quiz question. What note is this one? Again, another landmark note. Is it bass C, middle C, bass F, or bass G? All right, so we're answering a little bit more confidently now. Think about the other name for that bass clef. All right, I think we mostly were on the same page. Wonderful. So this, yes, that was bass F. And again, if you remember, I'll just pop back to this screen for 1 second. Remember, that was this guy down here, because if you remember that this is called the F clef, that helps you remember that that's your F line, which will be the F right here below the middle C. And let's see how that affects our rankings. All right, George coming up from behind. We have a true or false next. This note is treble G, just true or false. Again, look at that clef. And again, banter in the chat is not only welcome, but encouraged. All right, the correct answer was false, because that note that it showed was this C down here. Remember, we talked about treble C and bass C on both sides of the middle C. That's what that was. And so let's see how that affects our leaderboard. All right, we had a few shifts. All right, let's continue. Next one's a puzzle question. This will be the last question before we go to the next portion of our talk, but put these notes in the correct order from left to right, all landmark notes. So again, drag these so that they're in the correct order from far left to far right, not bottom to top, not top to bottom, but left to right. Yes, the ones that give you more points require a little bit more thought and brain power. Is the banter fun? Somebody tell me if it's fun in the chat. All right, oh, we were kind of divided there. So yes, so the correct answer, bass F, treble G, treble C, and then middle C. So let's go ahead and see how that changed our leaderboard before we talk about intervals next. Something shifted here a little bit. So now we have Livia in the lead, followed by Annie, who's on a streak, followed by Nova. Okay, so we're gonna come back to our Kahoot game in just a moment. So the points are gonna accumulate from one chunk to the next. So next we're gonna talk about intervals, which are going to be key to being able to read music fluently. So an interval, that's just a fancy term for the distance between two notes. So for example, I'm just gonna erase this so that's all clear. Say we have these two notes. The way we would measure that interval is we would count from the bottom note to the top note. So in this case, 1, 2, 3, we would call that a third. If we went a one bigger, 1, 2, 3, 4, we'd call that a fourth. We'd call this a fifth, we'd call this a sixth, we'd call this a second. And why do we care? It's key to reading music, because when we read music, as much as so many teachers put such an emphasis on letters, we really don't actually use them that much when we're playing music, but rather we look at the distance between the notes to read those shapes, to read those lines, to read those chord shapes, and so on. And I'm going to show you a few examples of some key intervals that you want to recognize when you're playing music, and I'll show you an example of how this applies right away. Let's say that you have these four notes. So this is an example of an interval called a second, also known as a step. So when we have a note that's on a line, or a line is going through that note, we would say, followed by a note that's in the very next space, we could count from the bottom note to the top note. 1, 2, we'd call that a second. And then a nickname for this one that we often use is we just call that a step, because those notes are right next to each other. So when we have four notes like this, we're not going to play those notes and think G, A, B, C, but we're going to play those notes and think G, step up, step up, step up. We don't have to think about letters at all. And that unlocks so much, because especially if you have these 5 landmark notes memorized really well, you can use those to help you find your starting place. And let's say we had like a bunch of notes that start on bass C, maybe go up, down, up. And again, when playing this, instead of thinking C, D, E, F, E, D, E, F, G, see how confusing that is? We can just think C, step up, step up, step up, step down, step down, step up, step up, step up. And if any parents are checking this out, or your kids are younger when you're watching this, one thing that can be a challenge sometimes is associating the upward direction with going to the right on the piano for the higher pitches, and the notes heading downward going to the left on the piano for the lower pitches. So that's just something to keep in mind there. Now, this is just one example of a really important interval. If you can master steps and skips, that unlocks so much, because so many melodies use like 80% steps and skips. And so what I just showed you was called a step, also known as a second. Next, I'm going to show you a third. So that would be if we had, say, well, I'll show you steps first. So say we have G, step up, step up. So you know that's these 3 notes. Now if I take out that middle note, we would call this a third, also known as a skip, because we're skipping the note that would be in between. So this is another interval shape that you can work on recognizing in the music that you're already practicing, because it goes from a line to a line, or it also goes from a space to a space. Excuse me. Let's go through another example here. Like let's say we have let's say we have this set of notes here. So again, we wouldn't think G, A, C, B, C, D, but we would think G, step up, skip up, step down, step up, step up. So go ahead and drop in the comments if this is, I would love to hear if this is a new concept for you, or if this is your, or if you're already used to reading music like this. I always like to see in the comments if this is a new sort of life-changing concept for reading music, because again, it makes it so much easier, like ridiculously easier. I'm just gonna check the comments there. Don't see any coming through yet, and I'll edit this out in the replay. Okay, so I'm going to take no comments as this sounds awesome and everything is being explained really well. Okay, fantastic. So we've talked about seconds and thirds, steps and skips. So next, let's talk about some slightly bigger intervals, and then we're going to go back into Kahoot so that you can put these skills into use. Now the bigger intervals, like let's take this one, like let's take a line here to a space here. That's a little trickier to recognize. Eventually we want to recognize an interval like this just as easily as we recognize an interval that's just a step away. So when in doubt, the way you can measure an interval is to think line, space, 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be a fourth. And that makes a really nice, it's the perfect distance from your thumb to your fourth finger or your second finger to your fifth finger. So again, when I see that in a piece of music, I don't think G, C, but I think G up a fourth. And at this point for me, I've been doing this for so long, it's just kind of second nature reading those shapes. And then I'll show you one more. And this is my favorite interval because it's kind of like the outer parts of a snowman. That's a space to a space with a space in between, or a line to a line with a line in between. And again, especially if you're just getting started with reading intervals like this, you can just count line, space, line, space, line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's your fifth. Or another way I like to think of a fifth is that it's just 2 skips. So if I start from the bottom note, go up a skip, and then up another skip, fifth. And the cool thing about a fifth is it fits, for most people's hands it fits, as long as you don't do anything funny, it's a perfect distance between your thumb and your fifth finger. So just to review those interval shapes really quick before we play our game, we've got, again, steps that just alternates line, space, line. And then we've got skips that go line, 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 or space, 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 also known as thirds. So with steps and skips, those are the nicknames for seconds and thirds. Once we get to fourths and beyond, there are no nicknames. We just have to use the number name because we don't have a million nicknames for everything. And then beyond that, we have fourths, which another way you can think of that is it's just a skip and a step. So that's your fourth. Again, skip and a step. Another way you can think about that. And then you have the fifth. That's your outer parts of the snowman. Just taking a look here. So glad to hear it was a great game changer. Always love the encouragement. And then King Vibe said, it is I'm going to assume that was an incomplete thought. And with that, let's go back to our Kahoot game and put this interval stuff into practice and see how that changes our leaderboard. So the next question, true or false? An interval is the distance between 2 notes. And that bridge was supposed to symbolize distance. An interval is the distance between 2 notes. I bet you weren't expecting me to ask for a definition question. All right, the answer is true, an interval. It is a term that you want to hang on to. If you take one thing from this for your music reading skills, it's remembering what an interval is. That is the distance between 2 notes. That's the general term for those steps, skips, fourths, fifths, and so on. And so let's see how that changes things. We've got Clara coming up from behind, a couple little changes. And let's go on to the next question. Another quiz question. What is this interval? So now we're going to try to name this specific interval. So we're going to line to the very next space. Is that a step, skip, fourth, or fifth? Step, skip, fourth, or fifth? All right, I think we did pretty good on that one. And again, you can't go wrong. Steps, just alternate space, line, space, line, space. So let's see if that changes anything on our leaderboard. Basically the same. Let's continue on. And again, if anybody has any questions about anything, if anything's confusing, maybe you're feeling a little overwhelmed at the pace we're going, do feel free to drop in the chat. I want to make sure everybody watching this gets a whole lot of value out of it. All right, and then our next question. What is this interval? You probably see a trend here. All right, so a little bigger, space to space. When in doubt, just count from the space of the first note to the space of the next note. Count up whatever you have to do. And again, the goal as you work through this is to be able to look at that and recognize instantly what that interval is to be able to translate that to your piano. All right, nicely done. Yes, the correct answer was skip. And then just to pop here for 1 second, sometimes students get a little bit confused because they'll see space to space, and those kind of look like they're one after the next in the same sort of sequence because they look the same. And so if it's ever confusing, one thing you can think is this is sort of your baseline, line, space, line, space, line, space, like those steps. That's kind of the ladder going up. And then when we're looking at skips, you can just sort of imagine that you're kind of getting rid of some of these. So your sort of baseline from which you measure intervals is this, more or less. All right, and let's see how that changes things based on that last question. We have Adrian coming up from behind. Well done. And we have a true or false. This interval is a fifth. True or false? And again, when in doubt, count from the bottom note to the top note. All right, well done. If anybody wasn't sure, if you were on the fence about that, maybe you got lucky, just to kind of spell that out really quick. I can't toggle back and look at the notes or it'll get erased, but I believe it was here to here. And again, the stem direction means nothing. I mean, it doesn't not mean anything, but in terms of reading the pitch, we're going to focus on the note heads. And so if you're not sure, you can count from the line note to the space note. So line, space, line, space. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's your fourth. And so let's see how that changes our leaderboard standings, if at all. Oh, Annie D coming up from behind. It's an intense match between everybody, pretty much. And then we got one more question about intervals before we move on. It's a puzzle question, and this one is double points. Put these intervals in the correct order. Now remember, the interval, that's the distance between two notes. So don't look at that first note and try to figure out an interval. Look at the first note and then the second note. The distance between those two, that's your first interval. All right, so remember to put those in order from left to right. And we're not worried about whether it goes up or down, just whether it's a skip, a step, a fourth, or a fifth. All right, it's about 50-50, and that's why it's a double points one. This is a tricky one. Let's go through that really quick, especially if you got it incorrect or you were a little confused there. I just kind of sketched these out really quick. So the correct order, so we had, this is our starting note, so it's a line, then we went to the very next space, so that's a step. And then from here to here, that's gonna be a skip. And again, if you're not sure, start here, step up, 1, 2, 3, third, also known as a skip. And then from here to here, that's down a fifth. And again, if you have to figure it out on the fly, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down a fifth. And then from here, space, line, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then that's up a fourth. If that clarified it a little bit for those who maybe didn't get that one, that did not get that one correct, do let me know in the chat, because again, we want to make sure that we're giving you all the tools that you need to succeed beyond the live stream. And so let's see how that changes our leaderboard. Okay, Adrian, whoa, Adrian really skyrocketed up on that one. Nicely done. Those double points one can really change the game there. And so we're going to break there for a moment next, because now we're going to talk about how to use the landmarks that we talked about and the intervals that we just talked about to be able to figure out any note on the entire grand staff. But first, real quick, if you're having fun, I wanted to invite you real quick to go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button and hit the notification bell. When you do that, you'll automatically receive a notification anytime we publish a new video, we start a new live stream. We're trying to do these live streams at least once a week to provide that interactive sort of fun. And then we also post new videos and shorts and all that good stuff. And then if you're interested in lessons, maybe you don't have a teacher yet, do feel free to check us out in the description, especially if you're an adult who wants to find community and get some live instruction with me and the other teachers. We have an awesome membership platform called 88 Keys Online that features periodically updated video content, sort of video courses you can follow along with at your convenience, discussion boards, and live Zoom group lessons with me and the other teachers at South Shore Piano School. So if that's of any interest, be sure to check that out in the description below. We'd love to welcome you to the 88 Keys online community or to South Shore Piano School if you're interested in one-on-one lessons. And so with that, let's go ahead and get back to grand staff reading. We've talked about our 5 landmark notes. We've talked about intervals now. And so now we're going to put those two concepts together that's going to unlock basically the entire grand staff. So again, think of this video or think of this live stream as kind of like the driver's ed class that you take. We're going through it all really quick, but then you want to make sure you put it into practice on a regular basis to get really good at this. Because nobody got really fluent at this grand staff thing just by watching a 1-hour video. So just keep that in mind, especially if it feels like we're moving a little fast. But let's take a look at we got our 5 landmark notes. We have our C, we have our G, we have our treble C, we have our bass F, and then we have our bass C. And so the assumption here is that you have these 5 landmark notes totally memorized backwards and forwards. You can write them, you can envision them when you're looking at a new piece of music. I mean, you want to basically be obsessed with these 5 notes because those are going to be your anchor points to find any other note that you want. So as you're reading music, like let's say you need to figure out this note. I'll go ahead and just put it in a different color. It's not a landmark note. However, you do know this one really, really well. Theoretically, that's treble C right here. And you know your intervals really well. So space to the very next line. So that note is going to be D. It's so much easier than doing any of these mnemonics, right? And then let's try another one. Let's say you have this note. Again, not a landmark note, but you know your F because you know that this is called the F clef. And this is just a step up from that. That brings us to G. Let's try a slightly harder one, but nothing off the charts. Let's say we have this note here. Okay. Anybody know the distance from that note to that note? Drop it in the chat. So we have space to space. And again, if you're not sure what it is, you can just count space, line, space, 1, 2, 3. That's down a third, also known as a skip. So we would go from that landmark bass C down a skip, and that's going to be A. Now, you're not going to have to do this forever. This is sort of a bridge, because as you get more experience, you'll be able to just look at that and know that that's the note. That's the ultimate goal here, is to be able to look at a note on the grand staff and be able to find it on the piano as quickly as possible, really without needing to think about the letters that much. And let's try one more that's a little bit harder. We'll try this one way up here. So this one's a bit bigger than a skip or a step. So again, you can think 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's an F up here. And again, I think this system also helps with finding these notes in the correct octaves. I think all of us who have had students with like letters scribbled next to every single note on the piano, they may have played the right pitches, but they're in the wrong octaves, so to speak. So this system also helps you not only find the notes that you're trying to find, but also in the correct octave on the piano. And then this will not be in the Kahoot, but I'll show you one sort of like level 2 landmark to think about is once we get so high or so low beyond what the grand staff can handle, we have to add these extra lines. These are called ledger lines. And we actually have 2 landmarks outside of the staff. 2 lines above, 2 lines below. There's going to be 2 C's above your middle C and 2 C's below your middle C. So when you're reading notes with ledger lines, really high or really low, you can use those as your anchor points to use this same system. And if that's a new concept for you, I'll show you this very quickly. Again, we're not going to use this in our Kahoot match because this is a sort of next level grand staff reading. But we have our note on the line, we have the space, we have the line, we have the space. Now, we've run out of lines. So in order to continue, we have to add extra lines. So space, the next note, we would add a little line like that. That's called a ledger line. So middle C actually is on a ledger line if you think about it. Now if we want to step above this, we need a space. We're not going to draw an extra line for that though. The next space would just kind of sit on that line. And then to keep going, we'd add an extra line. And then to keep going, the space would be sitting on top of that. So we never add any extra lines for those unnecessarily. And so if we're starting from our treble C, these notes would just be, oh, sorry, yes. Step up, just steps up all the way into the higher registers of the piano. If that's a little confusing, go ahead and just let me know in the chat. Again, we want to make sure everybody's leaving with some wonderful nuggets of knowledge to make playing the piano so much easier. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to jump back into our Kahoot. We're going to use these skills, again, your 5 landmarks, your intervals, and we're going to use those to try to identify some notes that are not landmark notes. All right, so let's dive back into here. And the next 3 questions are going to be using those landmark notes to find some mystery notes. Here we go, quiz. Just simple one, what note is this? All right, think about what the closest landmark is. Use the interval to find it. I'll give you a hint, the landmark is treble something. All right, nicely done. All right, overall, pretty good success. I'll pop back into here real quick, especially if you didn't get that one quite right, just so you understand. So the mystery note was this one. And the hope as we go is that you have this treble C memorized really well. And then this is just one step up from that. That's gonna be your D. So let's see how that affected our leaderboard. Okay, a couple slight changes. Let's continue. Same theme here, quiz, what note is this one? Again, think where the closest landmark is, follow the interval. Thank you, Elucio Rand, for the kind words. I always appreciate it. All right, nice job. I think we're getting it. Are we getting this concept, especially if it's a new one, or at least we understand the premise enough to be able to practice it on our own? I'll show you really quick. These were the notes in question. So this was the mystery note. Closest landmark is bass C. This is a skip down or a third down. That'd be a low A. So let's see if that changes our leaderboard at all. All right, Annie D is on a big streak. Answer of 10. Whoa. All right, let us continue. We have one more quiz question. What note is this? You probably notice a theme here. All right, again, think treble C. Oh, I gave that away. Oh, man. All right, well, now you know what the closest landmark is. All right, well done, well done. And I'll show you that real quick. So we looked at this example briefly. So notes up here, if you think treble C, so that's here. We're going up a skip and a step, also known as a fourth, to find that high F. Let's see how that affects our leaderboard, and then we're gonna bring it all together with applying this to some actual music. Okay, our leaderboard is basically the same. All right, and so, I'm going to back out of this. Sorry, a couple technical difficulties. There we go. Okay, and so now we're going to talk about how to actually apply this to a piece of music. And we'll take a look at a couple of examples of different levels so you can see, all right, when you're looking at a brand new piece of music, how the heck do we use this to get going playing our pieces really fluently? So I'll show you a couple pieces that I really like to teach out of the Royal Conservatory anthologies. We are a Royal Conservatory participating school. We have a lot of students participating in the exams. What I like is these pieces kind of revolve around these landmark notes. So the piano pieces were composed with these sort of concepts in mind, which make them really great teaching pieces. So like, let's say you're starting to learn this piece, Sleigh Bells. And at the beginning, anybody know what that note is based on what we talked about with landmark notes? That would be bass F. And again, that's a beautiful thing because if you have your 5 landmark notes memorized really well, boom, there's your F. And then you could look at the left hand here a couple different ways. You could just think these are all landmark notes, right? It's F, C, F, C, F, or better yet, if you think F, down a fourth, up a fourth, down a fourth, up a fourth, makes it so much easier to play. And then here we have our treble G with a step right above it. That just means it's going to be a G step above. We're going to play those at the same time. So, and then once we get here, and again, many of us have seen students playing with C, D, E, F, E, D, C scribbled in their music, and a lot of times they'll play it like down here, because again, letters, when we're reading that, instead of actually looking at the notes and the directions, it doesn't give us the octave we're in. So if you know that this is your treble C landmark, you don't even need to worry about the letters for these, because you're just going to think C, step up, step up, step up, step down, step down, step down. Pretty cool, right? I'll show you another example, so slightly more advanced. Let's say we want to take a look at this etude in C here. Whoops, wrong one. I have so much music stored in my iPad since the COVID day. Here we go, this is the one I was looking for. And so let's say, I'm gonna pick somewhere in the middle of the piece just so it's a tiny bit harder. Like let's say you're learning this bit, right? It's a bit harder than that last example we looked at. And so if you look at this first note, notice it's not a landmark, but you know your treble C right here. Whoops, sorry. Getting a little iPad lag here. All right, so you know your treble C is right there in that third space. And so our mystery note at the beginning will just be one step up from that. All right, it seems that my my pencil stopped working, so I'm just gonna resort to my finger. So we know that that's your treble C, and there's just gonna be one step up from that. And then from there, we just think skip down, step up, step, 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 skip, step, skip. See how much easier that is than to think about letters all the time? Getting some nice comments here. Love this song. I assume you were talking about sleigh bells there. And then here in the left hand, these are once again starting on a landmark note. We have F, and again from there we don't have to think about letters. F, up a step, down a step, up a step, down a third, up a third, down a fourth, down a step, down a step, up a step, up a skip. And so as you're practicing something like this, again, we want to get out of the habit of thinking letters because it gets way too overwhelming, but rather looking at these shapes and how the intervals move relative to each other. Sorry. Steps apart, skip, both hands step up, skips towards each other, step down in the right hand, skip up in the left hand. And I'm trying to narrate at the speed of thought, but that's sort of the ultimate goal here as we're putting this together. So you can use your landmark notes, again, to find your starting places, and then use your intervals to read the music so much more fluently than if you were relying purely on letters alone. All right, I'm gonna pause it for just a moment, see if anybody has any questions in the comments or the chat, and then we're gonna jump in to the final stretch of our Kahoot game, and we'll see who the grand winner is. I'm going to assume nobody has any questions. The chat looks pretty quiet, so I'm going to assume that either our live stream is doing what we hoped it would do, or people are just still kind of processing a little bit. And again, feel free to drop any questions in the comments. Questions in the comments will live forever. Stuff in the chat may or may not show up later. If you want it to live forever, check it out in the comments section. Otherwise, go ahead and drop it in the chat. All right, and so with that, we have 4 more questions before our Kahoot game concludes. All right, first, true or false? When we play piano, we use letters to read music. I'm hoping this is like one of the big takeaways from today. Do we actually use letters when we're doing... Can our brains move that fast to think letters? Dropping some hints here. All right, so we're about half and half. Okay, cool. So let's unpack that just a little bit. So again, looking back at this, again, we don't want to think letters, because if we had to think like D, B, C, D, E, F, that's way more confusing than if we were thinking skip, step, 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 skip, step, skip, step. All right, let's see if that changes our leaderboards at all. All right, it's pretty much the same. All right, let's see how things change. Things could change in the next 3 questions. All right, next one's a quiz question. What is the right-hand starting note here? The right-hand starting note, think closest landmark, and then what that starting note is. All right, we had a majority ruling. Excellent. So yes, that starting note is E. I'm going to go ahead and pop out of here just so I can explain why. So here's that same piece I was showing earlier. There's your starting note. And so if you think that your treble C landmark is here, so that's this, 1 C above that middle C, this is 2 steps up from that, also known as a skip. And that makes it a third. And there's your starting note. Make sense, everybody? Oh, I think we can all relate to the feeling. I think we can all relate to the feeling when you know the answer and then panic and press the wrong one. All right, but let's see if that changes our leaderboard at all. Okay, we're about the same. Sorry, one little technical hitch. Okay, let's continue. We have 2 more questions left. Or I think we have 2 more questions left. Yes, 2 more. What is the first interval in the left hand of this piece? Oh, wait a minute. Whoops, I don't have the right screen up. There we go. What is the first interval in the left hand? All right. That would be a 5th. Let's go ahead and take a look at that. So that was the first 2 notes in the right hand here. And again, if you don't quite recognize it at sight, you can go from space to space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Space line, space line, space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then there's your 5th. Let's see how that changes things on the leaderboard. Okay, we had a slight shift. And we have 1 more question left. This is going to be a double points. It's going to be a challenge one. List these intervals in the right order from left to right. Correct order from left to right. So again, start from your starting note and then follow those intervals. It's a tricky one. Remember, don't look at the first note and think what the interval is. All right, we were about 50-50 there. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. So that one's starting note, 3rd down, step up, 4th up, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5th down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if there are any questions in the chat, of course, and then let's see how our winners stacked up. In 3rd place, we have George, followed by Annie D. And then in 1st place, we have Livia. Congratulations. All right. Hopefully this was fun for everybody, even if you weren't necessarily in the top 3. The point of this was to make it a learning experience and have some fun along the way. But thank you so much for playing. And we're not going to play that again. I'll go ahead and pause that. And so from here, I'm just, let's see. And so I'm hoping that everybody got something out of this, whether you've already done intervals and this sort of enhanced your understanding, or maybe this is a totally new concept for you and it's opened the door to being able to read music even more fluently. But At this point, be sure to subscribe. Of course, if you haven't subscribed already, stay tuned for our future live streams. And at this point, we're just going to take a couple moments or a couple minutes for a quick Q&A. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and drop that in the chat. I can bring up the keyboard again. If anybody's confused about anything, we can talk through some things in a little bit more detail. I'm just kind of scrolling through here. It seemed like, for the most part, everybody was having fun and enjoyed the energy. Always appreciate the positive comments, everybody. Okay, I don't see anything in the chat, so I'm going to go ahead and assume that everybody got something positive out of this. And again, this will be available as a replay once everything's kind of processed on YouTube's end, so be sure to go back if there's anything you want to review. And also check out some other videos on our YouTube channel. We do have other videos that go through this whole grand staff thing. We actually have a video that focuses on the bass clef specifically, because a lot of times people have a harder time with the bass clef than the treble clef. And with that, again, be sure to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.